أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين باره الخلائق أجمعين الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآله. أما بعد فقد قال أبو عبد الله عليه السلام إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي محمد وسيرة أبي علي بن أبي طالب صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, thank you for coming in this evening, this late evening. I'm not used to lecturing this late, so it's going to be first time for myself. But nevertheless, the nights are such and the days are such that the love of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam brings us to this occasion, to these events, to commemorate his martyrdom, inshallah. I'm not new to England, I'm not new to London, and I'm familiar with a lot of faces. So, as I said, I'm not new, but definitely I'm new to speaking, in London. I've spoken in South London, I've spoken in other places, but this is a little bit different, a very mixed crowd. So inshallah, I hope that whatever I have prepared will not be a waste of time for all of you, because that will not be good, inshallah. As we are commemorating these nights of Muharram, I thought that the first night I would take some time to just lay the foundation and talk a little bit about the history of the event of Ashura, the event of Karbala, but perhaps from not from a new perspective, but share something new about it from a political perspective. Just to sort of, perhaps some of you may not have heard about some of these things that I will mention tonight. Just to explain a little bit, why did Abi Abdullah alayhi salam say that he wants to leave Medina with the intentions to do islah, reform and rectify the community? And then when you continue that statement, he actually says that when he intends to do this, he wants to do amr bil ma'aruf, nahi anil munkar, and he says something very interesting after that. He says he wants to follow the Seerah of his grandfather. The Seerah or the Sunnah is the way of his grandfather. And this line is very, very interesting. What does he mean that he wants to follow the Seerah of his grandfather? The Seerah of the grandfather is what? The Islam, meaning Salat and Siyam and Hajj. These are the rulings of Islam. This is the rulings and the teachings of the Sharia. So were these things abandoned at the time of Muawiyah and Yazid? Were Muslims not praying at that time? Were Muslims not fasting? Were Muslims not performing Hajj? No, we know that they were performing the Salat, they were performing the Hajj, people were fasting, people were going for Umrah, people were giving Zakat. So what does he mean over here that he wants to follow the Seerah of his grandfather? This is a very interesting, statement. Before I go into that further in detail, another preliminary I want to mention is that Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, in other statements, he says that he wants to fight against the fasad that is prevalent in the community. Okay, so we know that there is corruption and there is fasad. Now, when you look at the Quran, you find that fasad and corruption can be of different types. For example, if there is theft that is prevalent in society, people commit crimes by stealing, this is a type of fasad. Or for example, people are lying in society there's a community that is known for lying and cheating. Inshallah, it is not our communities, but some communities are known for their, lies and cheating. That is a type of fasad. And the Quran actually points out this type of fasad. For example, Surah Araf, it talks about Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا. We sent Shu'aib, the Prophet, to the town of Madian. And Shu'aib said, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُم مِّنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. O people, come and worship and obey this Lord. There's no God besides this Lord. وَلَا تَنْقُصُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ. And do not cheat with the scales. So back in those days, the way that they would, not back in those days, even today in many countries, they actually have a physical scale to measure and weigh for example, the vegetables or whatever fruits. So people back in the days, if they wanted to cheat and charge a higher price, for example, they might stick something on the scale to make it weigh more, and then they can charge you more. And there are multiple ayat in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the Prophet to call this type of fasad out. Surah Mutaffifin is well-known surah, revealed for this purpose. Wailul lil mutaffifin, people who always are cheating with the system. This is a type of fasad that the prophets were fighting against. But did Imam Hussain alayhi salam do his entire movement because of this type of fasad that was prevalent in the society? I mean, why make such a big scene out of it? Why refuse to give bay'ah and then go through all the troubles and leave his city and go with the women folk from Medina to Makkah and from Makkah to Kufa? Like, what's up with all the, the efforts and the struggles and then getting killed and martyred in the plains of Karbala for this type of fasad? Did he really need to do all of this just to tell people that, hey, stop lying, stop cheating, stop cheating the system? He could have done that sitting in Medina, give admonitions like the prophets would used to do. Why all of this struggle? So if we come back to the Quran, we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talks about a different type of fasad as well. Not just a petty fasad. And where is this? The best examples of this type of fasad you find is in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. Okay, multiple ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Fir'aun. Okay, I'll quote just one ayah where Allah says that إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ يُضَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. That Fir'aun exalted himself on the land, okay, on the earth, and broke apart its people, made different factions out of it, and he began to do dhulm on these people, slaughtering their newborn sons and keeping the girls alive. As you know, that there was a prediction by some of the fortune tellers of Fir'aun that there will be a boy that will be born and he will basically finish you. So Fir'aun began to kill all the boys and spared all the girls. But how did he do that? He exalted himself on the earth, declared himself as Rabb, that I am the Lord, I am the one who is sustaining this community, this society, and whatever I say, that goes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this individual is from the mufsideen. Now, this is not just an individual going and, for example, committing a crime and doing a murder, which is a fasad. The person who commits a murder is a fasid. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that Fir'aun, which is a sort of symbol for an authority and an entire system, Allah is saying this individual created an entire system, and that system was basically a fasid system, a corrupt system. So we understand from the Quran itself that there are two types of fasids. One are those that commit petty crimes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this throughout the Quran. Allah says, do not bury the infant girls in Makkah. To the people of Jahiliyyah, do not bury the infant girls. Do not, for example, cheat the system. Do not lie. Be nice to your parents. Do not steal the wealth of the orphans. These are individual crimes that people commit. But Fir'aun had an entire system that was corrupt from the very core, from the very root. And this dichotomy, this sort of difference, you need to understand in order to understand what Imam Hussain alayhi salam means when he says he wants to follow the seerah of his grandfather. So this point, inshallah, is understood. Now let's come back and rewind a little bit and let's go back to the seerah of the Holy Prophet for a moment, and that will help you understand what Imam Hussain meant from this statement. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ali, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When he moved to Medina, so from the 1st Hijri till the 10th Hijri, he made a lot of different alliances and treaties with the Arab tribes in the region. Almost 135, 137 treaties that he signed with different tribes. Or, for example, the most famous one is the Constitution of Medina. If you search this up, the Constitution of Medina, this is one of the most famous treaty that he made with the people of Medina, the Jewish tribes and the polytheist tribes as well, and some of the local tribes. And you can read it. All the articles of that constitution are translated into English. You can see it. And basically what these alliances did were give protection to the Muslims, but the Muslims also gave protection to these Arab tribes. Not all of them were Muslims. In almost none of these treaties do you find the Prophet forcing any sort of conversion to Islam. In almost none of them. Okay? So the Prophet kept signing treaties and treaties and treaties until after the Battle of Hunain, which is near the end of the life of the Prophet. After the conquest of Mecca, the Battle of Hunain happens, and he signs a very important treaty at that time, which is called the treaty with the Bani Thaqif. There was a tribe called Bani Thaqif, and they used to live in what they call the Tihama region. Tihama is basically modern day Riyadh, and all the way up till the border of the Sassanid Empire, the Persian Empire at that time, Fars. Okay. When the Prophet signed this specific treaty, without going into the details of it, he actually asked the Bani Thaqif to convert. He says, either you convert or we will continue to fight you. Because there was a conspiracy that they were doing. As I said, I don't want to go into the details, but he actually said that you should convert or we will fight you to death. So the Bani Thaqif converted, and within a day or two, Islam and the Muslims spread from that basic region of Mecca, Medina, Taif, that region, all the way up till the northern boundaries. Within 2 days. Because the Bani Thaqif had control over all of that land. Okay? Now, if you have conquered such a big land in a few days, the people who will be governing these areas are going to be people from that tribe, right? People who are familiar with the land, people who are familiar with the population, people who are familiar with the customs. They will be the most trustworthy people to govern over these lands, right? So the Holy Prophet began to appoint certain governors in these areas, and he began to tell them how to actually administer and govern these places. What should be the policies and rules and the seerah and the way in which you should run these places. So that became a sort of the seerah of the Prophet. Pay attention to this. That was known as the seerah of the Prophet. The way of the Prophet. Look, the seerah is different than the Quran. The Quran had the foundations, it had the ethics, the aqaid, it had some laws, but the practical application of all of that was where? The seerah and the sunnah of the Holy Prophet. So you had all of these ayat mentioning in the Quran, how you should treat the non-Muslims, how you should treat the Muslims, how you should treat the new Muslims that are coming in, how you should pay them, for example, to do ta'liful qulub, to reconcile their hearts. All of these ayat are being revealed, but the practical example of that is how the Prophet is demonstrating it. So the Prophet demonstrated all of this in that short time. Now, after the Holy Prophet passes away, ideally, of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, if he was ruling, that seerah would have continued. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. So, but what happens after that? There are two things that you have to remember. One is that in the Muslim community, the Quran isn't seen as an authority, of course, but so is the Sunnah and the Hadith and the Seerah of the Prophet. But who is seen as the individual who actually knows the Seerah of the Prophet? Who is familiar with the Seerah of the Prophet in the community? In the perception of the community, it is now the Sahaba, the companions. Not specifically the Ahlul Bayt, because they never got the power. The power was usurped. So in the minds of the Muslim community, who has the authority? Who is seen as the authority for interpreting the Seerah of the Prophet? The Sahaba, correct? And so you see over the next 3 decades or 4 decades even, the religious authority belongs to the companions. And the word that was coined at that time was alim or ulama. And ulama and alim was an individual who had affinity with the hadith of the Prophet. The word fuqaha didn't exist like that. Faqih, there was no such thing as a fuqaha. The fiqh development happened a century later. At that time you had ulama. Who are the ulama? These ashab who have some sort of affinity with the hadith. They heard the Prophet, he said this is what he used to do. So the authority is seen in their hands. Okay. And that's why many times when you see this sort of conflict between Imam Ali alayhi salam and the second Khalifa, or Imam Ali and the third Khalifa, oftentimes you will notice it is always over what? Not the Quran. It is over Amir al-Mu'mineen saying, hey, this is not the Seerah of the Prophet. This was not the Sunnah. This is not what the Prophet did. The ikhtilaf and the difference is happening over this. But the community, for example, accepts the authority of the Khulafa at that time because they are seen as the alim, ulama. That's what it was seen. Okay. Now, in this process, the Sunnah begins to start changing. As we know, some of these innovations were made. But more specifically, some of the innovations are going to have a big impact later on when Muawiyah comes, such as the Baytul Mal, the wealth of the public, of the Muslims. The second Khalifa began to distribute it unevenly. So if you are from the Quraysh, you get a certain level of benefits. If you are from the Shuhada, family of the Shuhada, you get a certain type of benefits. If you are from the wives of the Prophet, you get a certain rate. And then the ones that had nothing to show on their resume, they get almost nothing. So this was created in the second caliph's time, and Imam Ali alayhi salam didn't agree with this. He didn't agree with this. In the third caliph's time, of course we know that nepotism was a lot. He was putting his family members in all of these places, in positions of power. And it was a crisis for the Muslims because now that alim that they had in their mind, who was supposed to be so familiar with the tradition, is now basically subject to corruption. That was something that they could not fathom. How can the Sahaba and this alim who has a familiarity with the tradition, he's become corrupt? So then they came from all over the Muslim world to assassinate the third caliph. But remember, the issues were over money, distribution of money, wealth and power. And each of them was claiming that this is how the Prophet would have wanted it to be. And Amir al-Mu'mineen kept disagreeing with them. When Imam Ali comes into power, what is the main reason that people are not agreeing with him? Once again, it has to do with the wealth and the power. And the Imam kept saying that, hey, I'm trying to follow the way of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet, the way he would have wanted us to do it. People were not ready for it. Okay. Brothers and sisters, this kept going on and on and on until Amir al-Mu'mineen is martyred and Muawiyah is finally officially in power. As you know, there was a little war that happened between Muawiyah and Imam al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. It didn't last long. There was pressure on Imam Hassan to do the sulh. Muawiyah now officially is the caliph of the Muslim Ummah in 40 Hijri. Muawiyah will do something that will make you understand what Imam al-Hussain meant when he said, I want to follow the Seerah of the Prophet. And now you will understand what type of fasad he will be trying to fight against. Up until the Khulafa's time, the fasad, you could have said, it's petty, things that can be fixed. But when Muawiyah comes, over the 2 decades, he will change the entire system. Let me show you some examples. What did Muawiyah do? One of the policies of Muawiyah that he innovated was that he wanted to empty the city of Medina from the companions, from the Sahaba. Because what was it? People used to believe that the Sahaba are the religious authority. And Medina is the city of the Muslims, city of the Sahaba, city of the Prophet, city of the spiritual capital of the Muslims is Medina. So what's Muawiyah's tactic? Let me empty the city of Medina, bring all the Sahaba to Sham. Let me bring all the Sahaba to Sham, as many as I can. And that's literally what he did. He began to bribe many of the companions all the way to Sham. So now the city of Medina is getting emptier and emptier and emptier. And you know, even though Imam Ali had moved to Kufa during his time, that transfer was just a political transfer, not a spiritual transfer. The spiritual city was always Medina. All the Aimma alayhimus salam, most of them, born in Medina, lived in Medina for most of their lives. Many are buried in Medina. Even the later Imams who were buried in Qadimain or Khurasan, they lived most of their lives in Medina. So Medina was always the spiritual city. Muawiyah wanted to change that. He says, no, I will make Sham the spiritual city. How am I going to do it? Well, I have to bring the people who are seen as the spiritual authorities, which is the companions. Let me bring them to Sham. Where was he getting all the money from? That's something interesting to figure out. Where is Muawiyah getting all of this money? Muawiyah, because remember, Baytul Mal, the public treasury, the Khalifa does not own it. It is not the Khalifa's personal money. That's why in that famous event when Talha and Zubayr come to visit Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Imam Ali Islam has that candle burning, and Talha and Zubayr come in, Imam Ali, what does he do? He turns off the candle. Why? Because he says, well, you're coming for a personal conversation, and this candle is from the public treasury. This is not my personal candle. If it was my personal candle, I would have kept it on. So the Baytul Mal is not the personal property of the Khalifa. So how can he be bribing and doing all of this stuff? Well, he did something interesting. In ancient Persia, pre-Islamic times, the Persian Empire had a sort of taxation system where they would take tax from the land, kharaj they call it. Muawiyah adopted that pre-Islamic Persian taxation system, and he started to take tax from all of these new Muslims that were converting. This is different to the jizya, which is the poll tax. That's different. This is kharaj, this is land tax from their properties. And he made that the personal property of the Khilafah. So Muawiyah is getting very, very rich. And that's why he's spending left, right, and center, because it's easy to buy people out. So he begins to bribe people and brings them to Sham. Now, once he has these companions in Sham, and the companions are those individuals who are seen in society as those who are familiar with the hadith of the Prophet. They are ulama. So what's the next step? Next step is to start paying these ashab to start fabricating narrations. I will quote some narrations that exist in the books of the Muslims. They may sound funny to you right now, but at that time it wasn't funny. These narrations were spread in the community, and imagine a young child who's growing up in Sham, what perception he would have had of Sham as opposed to other cities, and what perception he would have had of Muawiyah as opposed to Amir al-Mu'mineen. So look at this. And he would intentionally fabricate these narrations on the tongues of the Ansar. The Ansar were generally against the Bani Umayyah. So he would fabricate them and attribute them to the Ansar to gain credibility. For example, this is a hadith that he fabricated and he attributed it to the Holy Prophet, where the Prophet says, Ya tuba lisham, ya tuba lisham, ya tuba lisham. Good news or glad tidings and blessings be for Sham. 3 times. Remember, Sham is not conquered at the time of the Prophet. It's not something that Muslims even live there. So it would have been strange for the Muslims to hear, why is the Prophet just randomly one day waking up and saying, blessed be Sham, which is at that time lands of kufr and shirk. So the people say, قالوا يا رسول الله وبما ذلك, why are you saying, good news for Sham, or Sham is blessed? He says, I can see that the angels have spread their wings ala Sham, over Sham. And he's starting to give a sort of sacredness as opposed to Medina, where the Holy Prophet is. He is fabricating. So we talk about the hadith factory that Muawiyah created. Well, these are some of those ahadiths from that factory, right? But guys, this is the propaganda that was happening at that time. Look at this other narration. Imagine you are a young teenage boy and girl in Medina, and this is what you are being taught. The Prophet, this is fabricated, don't believe in this, please. He says, the Prophet says, إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ الْمَلَائِكَةَ فِي الْمَنَامِ أَخَذُوا عُمُودَ الْكِتَابِ. I saw in a dream that the angels are holding the Quran and they are facing it towards Sham. فَإِذَا وَقَعَتِ الْفِتَنِ فَإِنَّ الْإِيمَانَ بِالشَّامِ. When any fitna happens, then you should know that Iman and immunity and protection, and if you want to have salvation, you should be with the people of Sham. So when Siffin is going to happen, or any other battle is going to happen, they have heard from the Prophet. They're saying, I heard from the Sahaba. Sahaba are the people who saw the Prophet. And they are saying that when fitna happens, stick to Sham. Whenever there is a conflict between Muawiyah and anyone else, stick to Muawiyah. إِذَا وَقَعَتِ الْمَلَاحِمِ. When the trials and the tests will happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send from Dimashq a group of people on horses, the best of horses with the best of weapons, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support the religion through them, through these people of Sham. So brothers and sisters, they had created a lot of these type of narrations, and people are growing up listening and hearing these reports. So you can imagine how difficult it would have been for Amir al-Mu'mineen, for Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam, to fight and combat this. Propaganda is not easy to combat. And now on top of that, he has so much money and power. So Muawiyah, with this, once he had this strength, he said that from now on, I have created a sort of jama'ah and congregation, and I have created a sort of unity in the Muslim ummah. I have created unity. All of the Muslim lands are now consolidated under the Bani Umayyah and Muawiyah's ruling. So, anyone who is going to go against this unity and rebel against it, or not give allegiance, then they are no longer part of the jama'ah. So look, brothers and sisters, he literally changed the entire paradigm in 20 years. Where was the paradigm of the Holy Prophet ﷺ? And look at the paradigm that he changed in 15, 20 years. It's not overnight. Didn't happen overnight, but he had a whole strategy. He changed the paradigm. So that means now everyone that is being born in the last 20 years, young shabab that are growing up in that time in the Muslim era, they don't know anything about the Prophet and what paradigm the Prophet had brought for the Muslim ummah. They are growing up in the Umayyi paradigm. And this is what they understand. So anyone who will fight against this congregation and rebel against it, then they are no longer from the Jama'ah, and you should be able to kill them. And that's why in one of the letters that Imam Hussain alayhi salam writes to Muawiyah, he says to Muawiyah that, don't think I don't want to fight you. I would love to fight you. This is what he says, is I would love to fight you. And I know that you have killed many of the companions of my father. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he killed many of his companions. And the reason why, how Muawiyah was justifying this was by saying that I have the Sahaba with me. They are in Dimashq, they are ulama, they know the Sharia, they have familiarity with the Hadith, and everybody else does not have that same religious authority as I do, or credibility. So now, in this context, brothers and sisters, what does Imam Hussain say when he leaves Medina? He says, there's fasad in this society. Yazid is a fasid. So when he says Yazid is a fasid or a mufsid, this is not the fasad of someone just shortchanging you in a scale. He is saying there is a problem in the root of this entire system. The very core is corrupt. It doesn't matter if people are praying and fasting and going to Hajj. Hajj was a big event in the time of the Umayyads and the Abbasids. But the spirit of Islam doesn't exist. The reality of Iman does not exist. And the way of the Prophet, this is not the way of the Prophet Aslan. And that's what, brothers and sisters, when Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, when he leaves, this is one of his missions, and this is one of the things that he explicitly says when he leaves. He says, this is what I want to do. So brothers and sisters, it was not, Imam Hussain's mission is not just a trivial journey that he went on. He was being annoying, he doesn't want to give bay'ah. No, he has a problem with the entire system. And for that, the movement has to be revolutionary, the movement has to be transformative, and the mission is far, it's complex at that time. Inshallah, my main lecture series will start from tomorrow. Today, I just wanted to give a little bit introduction to the mission of Abi Abdullah alayhi salam. Tomorrow, I will start talking a little bit about how the Quran. So as I said, the Prophet had an entire journey. He brought an entire paradigm. And that paradigm was brought over 23 years. There was a process behind it. Inshallah, we will try to look at what the process of the Prophet was, because the Aimma alayhimus salam, they want to implement that process and further extend it. So we must first understand what the process was, so that we can. So look, today, in order to just understand one statement of the Imam, I had to explain to you a little bit of the back history of what the Prophet did. What was the Seerah? What was he doing? So that this statement of the Imam makes a little bit more sense. Inshallah, tonight I will not do the full Masaib, but I will read from the Maqtal of Abi Mikhnaf, just one statement that is linked with my topic. Brothers and sisters, when Imam Hussain alayhi salam is in Karbala, there are negotiations happening with Umar ibn Sa'ad. If you pay attention to Umar ibn Sa'ad's negotiations, Umar ibn Sa'ad doesn't actually believe that Ibn Ziyad is going to ask me to kill Imam Hussain. He doesn't believe that. He thinks that they are just trying to give trouble to Abi Abdullah. He can't really acknowledge that they will give him the orders to execute. So he's stalling. Umar ibn Sa'ad is stalling for 6-7 days. And he sends the letter to Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, and he says to Ibn Ziyad that, hey, I'm having a conversation with Imam Hussain salam, and you know what? He said that he will go away to a different land, and he won't give us any trouble, but he won't give you bay'ah, but he will go somewhere else. I want you to pay attention to the letter that Ibn Ziyad writes back to Umar ibn Sa'ad, and he sends Shimr with this letter. Because remember, Shimr was not in Karbala in the beginning. Shimr was sent because Umar ibn Sa'ad was stalling. Look at the letter that Umar ibn Sa'ad writes. Okay, this is in Maqtal of Abi Mikhnaf. He says, O Umar, I did not send you to Hussain for you to restrain yourself from fighting him. I didn't send you there to stall, nor to waste time, nor to promise him peace and preservation of his life. I didn't ask you to be an intercessor on his behalf with me. Ibn Ziyad is angry at Umar ibn Sa'd. Why are you stalling? Who's asking you to be an intercessor for Abi Abdullah alayhi salam? Look, if Hussain and his companions submit to our authority and surrender, then send them to me as captives. But if they refuse, then march against them until you kill them. Treat them in a manner that it should serve as a lesson for others, for they indeed deserve that. When Hussain is killed, listen to what Umar ibn Sa'd is saying 3 days before Ashura. Ashura hasn't even come yet. He says to Umar ibn Sa'd, when Hussain is killed, make the horses trample on his chest and on his back. For Hussain is aaq. Look at the word he's using. فَإِنَّهُ aaq. Aaq, brothers and sisters, means somebody who has detached himself from the jama'ah, from the congregation. Look at the language he's using. He is no longer part of the jama'ah that Muawiyah had said, that paradigm that Muawiyah and Yazid have made. He is no longer part of the jama'ah. So he is disobedient and he is an oppressor who has severed all relations. Subhanallah. Look at what he says. I do not consider that you trampling his body will be any way wrong after his death. It will not be wrong. It will be the right thing to do. And I have promised myself that I would do this to him if I killed him. Ibn Ziyad la'anatullah alayh. If you carry out our command and with respect to him, we will reward you with the reward for one who is obedient. But if you refuse, then leave our army and hand it over to Shimr, and we will have given him our instructions, and that is all. Ibn Ziyad la'anatullah alayh was telling Umar ibn Sa'd that trample the body of Hussain, and this is the right thing to do, and if you don't do it, I would have done this. Why? Because he considers Abi Abdullah alayhi salam to be away from the congregation. This is, brothers and sisters, the propaganda and the paradigm that the Bani Umayyah had made. We in our day and age have to be very, very conscious and careful of the paradigms that have been created for us. We could be being brought up under paradigms that are completely against the Quran and the Seerah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have to do our best, inshallah, to be attached to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran. And through these 10 nights, inshallah, we hope to do that. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.